We're live. So thank you guys all once again for attending. We are just getting started for our third session of the day, smart contract development on Ethereum. So I'm going to be kicking over the controls to Shadman Hossain. Shad, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the presentation that you're going to be giving?
Sure, yes. So a little bit about me. I actually created some slides. Can you guys hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I graduated from George Mason University in IT in 2019, and I currently work at as a blockchain engineer at Lidos, focused mainly on enterprise solutions and with blockchain. So specifically in supply chain, healthcare, fintech, and matters of national security. So I'm primarily interested in also the financial use cases mostly that's happening in Ethereum. For example, a lot of the decentralized exchanges, personal tokens, a lot of staking, a lot of DeFi movements coming out of Ethereum is very interesting to me. I've also had my own startup back in 2017. I've also been involved in at the university level teaching blockchain, specifically smart contracts, to students. So today, primarily, I wanted to focus on this trend that I've noticed in the blockchain space, specifically on Ethereum, is personal tokens, and this is something that I'm sure many of you have heard of. Akon, the singer, he has its own Akon cryptocurrency. We also have other celebrities like NBA superstars like Spencer Dinwiddie, who also tokenized himself, essentially his NBA contract, and essentially, selling his contract in bonds. So celebrities, athletes are starting to tokenize their time. There are certain people that I've met in when I went to Denver that also starting to create their personal tokens and essentially selling these as services that that you can eventually redeem and kind of jumpstart yourself. It's almost like IPOing yourself, right? So what I'm noticing is, next there will be more celebrities, there'll be more singers, social media stars, and then eventually even you, right? Anybody with a personal brand. I can see this trend catching on, and eventually getting to a point where everybody has a personal token. And and this is something that I think would be very beneficial for a beginner to learn, because this is something that I also learned when I first discovered Ethereum, is how to just create a simple token. Whether it be, back in 2017, it was mainly ICOs where people were just creating coins that really didn't have utility, but just to, pump up and dump on the market. But these tokens are actually representing your time. It represents, one token can represent an hour of your time, right? So these tokens can have, does have a use case and does have a purpose, if used wisely, right? And so, what are some of the benefits of creating a personal token, right? The number one benefit is that the free market gets to decide the pricing for your services. So whatever you're offering, right? If you're a business consultant, if you are let's say a fitness trainer, or if you're a barber, right? Your time, those hours, you can tokenize yourself, and you can actually sell your tokens that represent an hour of your time ahead to your clients, to your fans, to your early supporters. And you can use these as, loyalty points, reward points, and incentivize yourself and your clients to hold your tokens or purchase your tokens, right? And then the free market also helps you decide what how your time is the most valuable to what usage, right? And you are also directly incentivized to deliver the value. Not to mention you get access to early capital, and this is not equity or debt financing. It's just a, it's just a pre-sale of your services. And tokenizing yourself on the blockchain, you have a global client base, right? You from the moment you deploy this contract, anybody around the anybody in the world, any part of the corner with access to internet can purchase these tokens, and that's what makes it so powerful, right? And also some individuals, celebrities, have actually created income share agreements through their personal tokens, where they are essentially pledging to give 15% of their income for the next 2 years, which I think is a fascinating idea. Um, but there are some risks and challenges to keep in mind, because there's no easy way to enforce these promises that you make to provide these services. So let's say you refuse to honor your redemptions of your personal tokens, right? It won't be great for your personal brand. And also, the bigger thing is there are no securities laws that are covering this emerging area of tokenizing time, or tokenization. So this is a very emerging area. So you have to keep in mind that this, it is a prepayment for services. It's not an investment. So in theory, it should mean less regulatory laws or even securities, because it's not a financial product. But obviously, there's more nuances with regulations. So you should definitely do your own research and get legal advice on this matter before you, go ahead and start, tokenizing yourself and selling these tokens to people and promising things that you obviously cannot keep. So bear in mind, this is cool technology, emerging technology, but there's also risk associated with it. So how to tokenize yourself, right? So there's 4 steps to tokenizing yourself. Number one is to create the token, which we will be covering, as this is a very beginner course. Number two is to create a redeem contract, so allowing people to redeem your token. And then put your token on an exchange, like a decentralized exchange such as Uniswap, where anybody in the world can go in and exchange or buy your tokens for Ethereum or DAI or any other cryptocurrency. And then the fourth step is that once they redeem it, you need to have a functionality that burns the token, right? So if somebody used an hour of your time through a token, you need to be able to burn that token, right? Because that token will never come back. It will never come back to you.
Hey, Shad, I think we lost your audio. Can you hear us?
Oh, it looks like I got disconnected here.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay.
Hey, I'm not sure exactly where I got disconnected.
You were only out for like 30 seconds.
Okay, so I was still on this slide, correct?
Yes.
So I'll just pick up from here. So yeah, as I was saying, so these are the 4 steps, and we'll be basically covering the first, creating just a token. But there's alternative easy way you can do this, where you can use OpenLaw, Uniswap, and Etherscan. And OpenLaw has templates to get your personal token up and running. So some of the development tools that you would need is the MetaMask plugin, that is that's in the Chrome extension web store. So you can just add this, and you'll have this little Firefox icon. That is essentially your wallet, right? And this holds all your cryptocurrencies, and this is what I usually use to during development, and most Ethereum developers use for their development. And just for the beginners out there, you want to make sure anytime you're developing, you are not on the main Ethereum chain, the mainnet, because obviously the mainnet has actual ether, and you do not want to spend actual Ethereum when you're developing. So always make sure you're in one of these test networks, either Ropsten or Rinkeby. I usually use Ropsten for my development purposes. So just keep in mind, right? So you can use Rinkeby or Ropsten, and you can get some test Ethereum. And the way you do that for your development purposes, right? You don't want to go buy, buy actual Ethereum. So the way you would do that after you make an account, uh, you can see I have like ton of accounts here, and it's pretty easy. You just hit the deposit button, and there's a test faucet where you hit get ether, and it takes you this site where you can just request ethers from the faucet. As you can tell, I've gotten a ton of ether. It's calling me greedy because I have too much, so I can't get any more. But that's how you'd get some test ether, right? So as you can see in my test Ethereum wallet, I have 4.5 Ethereum. So this is what I can use to deploy contracts and interact with the Ethereum test, the Ropsten test network. So another thing to keep in mind is every transaction you do on the blockchain does cost money, just like every call to your AWS, every resource you're using will cost you money. But blockchain specifically, sometimes it can get very expensive depending on the the network. So as of right now, the networks have been very busy. Both Ethereum and Bitcoin transaction fees are going through the roof. So the miners are asking for more gas, which essentially means that you have to pay more to deploy and do transactions on the blockchain, right? So that's another very important thing to keep in mind. So if you're a brand new beginner, number one thing you want to get is the MetaMask wallet. The number two thing that I would suggest is to um, go look at, I would say, the Ethereum page itself. So if you just search for Ethereum on Google, the first page would be ethereum.org. And once you come here, if you're just getting started where you don't know what Ethereum is, you don't know what ETH is, you would want to check out this individuals link where it takes you through all these questions a beginner has. But if you already know what Ethereum is, what it does, you've heard enough, you want to go to this developers tab and hit get started. And here there are lots of awesome resources for you. As you can see, that would help you essentially learn Ethereum smart contract development. I personally came in 2017, 2018, not really having much resources. All there was, I remember, was this Remix IDE, which I still use to this day. But the second biggest thing that helped me learn as a beginner in Ethereum was this course made by Crypto Zombies. And this is a very, very simple and fun way to learn the beginnings of Ethereum smart contract development. So these courses cover from the basics to advanced Solidity concepts to different collectibles such as the ERC 721 standard, where the tokens are all unique compared to ERC 20, where the tokens are all the same. And then connecting front ends to your back end. And then even deeper, where you can use development truffle frameworks such as Truffle to create complete full stack decentralized applications. So this is a very, very good resource that I highly recommend for complete beginners to get started. Like I said, this is how I learn, and you can see it's very simple, and it takes you through you know um, in a fun way where you can learn about these basic topics, starting from what is a contract, how from the hello world, and how do you start writing your first contract, and what do you have to do. And the cool part is, if you don't know the answer, you can just check answer and then show me the answer, and it tells you exactly what you need to do. So this is something that's geared towards anybody, even middle schoolers, high schoolers can pick this up. And so if you have some programming knowledge, this should be a piece of cake for you to get started, right? And the third thing I would say is, going back to our developers. um, our developer tab. So if you go to developer resources, this is also very, very helpful in terms of just getting started. If you just click on the first link right here, Ethereum 101, it takes you to this site called Kari, I believe. And this is a very helpful site that has a lot of technical documentations that cover Ethereum. So as you can see, Ethereum 101, what is Ethereum, understanding nodes, consensus protocols. So it goes pretty deep into the whole Ethereum stack, and the EVM. So this, if you just go through this, you'll have a pretty good idea on developing anything on top of Ethereum. And another cool thing to keep in mind is that Ethereum is Turing complete, which essentially means you can any application you see in today's world. So your Facebooks, your Instagrams, in theory, you can also create these on Ethereum. And the second thing to look at is the documentation itself. So Ethereum, it allows you to code in two different languages. In Solidity, which is the most popular language on Ethereum. It's very similar to JavaScript. So if you work with JavaScript, Python, or C++, this should be a piece of cake for you to pick up. And if you already know Python, you can code in Vyper. So I have heard some startups use Vyper, and a lot of those contracts ended up having issues, and they reverted back to Solidity. So if you're thinking about production grade, something that you want to launch, if you're a startup founder, I would suggest sticking with Solidity because it has been battle tested the most, and it has the most I would say the best resources for security testing of your smart contracts. So if I like to stick with Solidity. Most of my smart contract code that I write for my job is in Solidity. And the best thing that helped me is just reading through the documentation, right? That's the simplest way to just get started. It has, starting from the basic stuff to, what is a smart contract, uh, a simple storage. How would you store data on the blockchain, and how would you you know get the data. Another example is creating a coin. So every smart contract starts with the name contract, and we have a declaration of pragma solidity. And this kind of takes you through how a sample Ethereum coin that a lot of these ICOs, they essentially just copied and pasted it and essentially launched it for people to buy. So it's not too difficult. A lot of these things are already out there. You just have to go through it, look for it, read it, and really understand where you can apply it for your idea and for your use cases. And the second thing that I would say to look at is the cheat sheet. So this is also very helpful to me as a developer when I first started learning. And the cool part is, if you're looking at Solidity as well as Vyper, they have both side by side. So it takes you through the basic stuff. And as you can tell, it looks a lot like JavaScript. We have um, we have a lot of these same conditional statements and how the true and false work, how arithmetic operations work. It's essentially just like JavaScript with a little bit of difference here and there, such as concepts like ABI and this specific encryption method, KCAC 256. So this is also very helpful. You can, favorite this and save this as a reference. So anytime, you're coding, you're looking at, you need to figure out, how does a slice function work? You can just look this up. So this is, a very, very uh, important slash helpful cheat sheet that I use sometimes. So enough about it on here. We went through crypto zombies. So let's go back to, oh, there was one more thing that I wanted to show. If you go to GitHub, there's also a Ethereum book by if you just go to GitHub and search for mastering mastering Ethereum. there's a book by Andreas Antopoulos, who yeah, Antonopoulos, who, as a lot of you guys know, essentially is one of the biggest advocates for Bitcoin. You know, he's been in this space for a long time, and him and Gavin Wood, the co-founder of Ethereum, essentially wrote mastering this book called Mastering Ethereum, and it's free on GitHub. So you know, these chapters, obviously it's not organized nicely, but these chapters are all available. You can go in and, you know, read one chapter at a time, going through, you know, it goes pretty deep into concepts and storage, you know, how the back end application logic works, front end works, how the data storage works. So you know, if you want to get a deep understanding, this is also, I would say, a very good book, also a free resource that you can use to really understand the inner workings of Ethereum. So with that, I will go back into my presentation. And oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was the truffle framework. So let's say, you know, you did all those tutorials, you have a pretty good understanding of Ethereum, and you want to start building full stack, you know, applications with your back end, front end. This is a framework you definitely want to look into and use. It has a lot of things that are out of the box. So, for example, Ganache, which is a one-click blockchain that you already have. I have it up and running here that I can show you real quick. This is what it looks like if it loads, but it essentially gives you, you know, a ton of accounts already loaded that you can use to test it. And the crazy part is, you know, a lot of companies that you know and might have heard of are using this framework. We have Microsoft, Ernst Young, Amazon, General Dynamics, VMware, JP Morgan. So a lot of companies are using this framework for their applications. The other cool part is, if you're familiar with, let's say, React and front ends, you want to look into Drizzle, which just gives you front end components out of the box. So if you go to boxes, it gives you a lot of easy ways to get started, whether it be React Native or Vue, um, you know, a token through Open Zeppelin, which is another open source framework that gives you upgradable contracts. So you want to look through, you know, look through these boxes and see what you know, what interests you. And there's also games for, you know, a Crypto Kitties DApp, and this is something that I'm using right here, Kaleido. That's what I use for enterprise blockchain for business networks. So you'd want to look at, you know, what knowledge you have in terms of, you know, do you want to use React front end, or, you know, there's also Angular front ends as well. So this is a very good resource for you to get started on creating full stack applications out of the box using this framework, right? And the cool part is they are starting to work with other blockchains. So it's not just Ethereum, right? There's JP Morgan's Quorum, Tezos, Corda, and also Hyperledger Fabric. So, you know, you learning this framework, your skills will be applicable to, you know, many other blockchains. Maybe you know, it could be possible one day that even EOS is also one of these blockchains that works with it. So those are all the tools that kind of, you know, that you'd want to go in that order. So going back to, you know, how we would want to create a personal token, right? In specifically in Solidity. So a little bit more about Solidity. You know, these smart contracts, as I said, the best way you want to, you know, the best way to write it is in Solidity. You'd want to stick with that instead of Vyper, just because of security reasons. It's very similar to JavaScript, like I said. Um, and all contracts start with this version pragma of Solidity. So this is what you kind of state. This is the version I'm using. So one thing to keep in mind is Solidity is a language that's being updated almost every day, and a lot of the times a lot of code you find online doesn't work, and because this version number is wrong, and you want to make sure this version number is something that you keep updated, or you compile it with the right version number, because some of the code it usually breaks. Even this morning, as I was trying some code that I found online, it wasn't working because the version number is different, and the compiler is different. It just doesn't work. So going deeper, what is a ERC20? As I said, ERC20 is a token that a lot of ICOs have been using. It's essentially a set of standards functions that uh, allow us to integrate with other contracts, wallets, marketplaces, and it has simple things like the total supply of the tokens, the balance of the allowance, um, transfer, approve, transfer from, and it also has functions that allows you to find out about a user's balance and transfer funds from one user to another, making sure that they are authorized to transfer those funds. So writing a ERC20 token, there's some things that you want to keep in mind. The Solidity code lives on the blockchain specifically because we're deploying to the Ethereum blockchain. The blockchain has balances, so each address has balances, and these functions you can make it public or private. So most of these contracts you'd want it to be public because you want the contract to be able to be accessed from the outside world. And the keyword view essentially means that it's a constant, so the contract's internal state won't change. And in Solidity, an event is just allows the front end to know or get notified something happened. And the keyword mapping, it's just a key value array, so it maps um, the account addresses to the balances. And then also the second mapping here with the keyword allowed, it just includes the accounts that have been approved to withdraw from your wallet. So just going through the basics of what you would need to have, if you were creating a personal token, obviously you'd want to have a total supply. You wouldn't want you could have a token that is unlimited and you can just print as much as you want, out of it. But, in theory, if we're creating a personal token that represents an hour of our time, we obviously have a limited amount of time on Earth. So you'd want to calculate, how much total supply you'd want to give when you're creating your personal token. So, one cool thing I did was, how many hours do I have to live, live. So just to figure out, just to think, just to figure out how many hours does it make sense for me to put in terms of tokens, right? Because depending on the number of hours is how many tokens I would want to create. So I wouldn't want to figure this out with you guys right now, but you'd want to essentially, what I calculated was like 200,000 hours left of my life, me being 25, was what I can sell essentially as services to people. So that's something you want to keep in mind is, this function that declares total supply and sets it. And then the MSG sender is essentially the Ethereum account that's executing the contract. So this is basically you as the contract, as the person that's deploying the contract, who will get the total supply initially when this contract is deployed. And the second thing you want to do is to have functions to get the total supply and also get the balance of the token owner. So if somebody owns your token or purchases it from you, you'd want your contract to be able to read the balances of how who has how many of your tokens. And the other functionality you want to have is the ability to transfer your tokens to another account. And this is also pretty simple, self-explanatory. You want the receiver address and how much you're sending. And the require statement is essentially kind of a checking that if the balance of the sender is, has enough essentially to send the number of tokens you're trying to. And the balances get subtracted from the sender's account, and it gets, added to the receiver's account, and then you emit the transfer, and that's essentially how a transfer happens. This is approving and withdrawing tokens. So who is allowed to approve. So this function kind of gives you the functionality to delegate to let's say a marketplace or another wallet to approve it from your account. Um, and this also transfer from does the same thing, adding on top of the approve function. Also, you'll notice the require statements, making sure the owner of the token has enough, and also the sender of the balance has enough to do that. And lastly, you would want to use this library called SafeMath for Solidity specifically. This is very, very important because this library essentially allows you to avoid attacks, integer overflow attacks. So a lot of the times, people that write smart contracts don't usually check if their contracts are secure. The hack that happened in Ethereum years ago, when they had to roll back the chain, and then we have Ethereum Classic. The chain split, and that part of that reason was because there was an integer where there was no checker for ability to have negative integer, and somebody tried it, and guess what? Because there was no check for negative integers, the wallet got drained, and we had millions of dollars in losses. So this is something that you'd want to make sure that you integrate to your code. So going back to tying this all together, what we want to make sure you have your MetaMask wallet, and we have some test Ethereum in our MetaMask wallet that we got from the faucet. And you can get this code that I'm going to show you right now. This is the Remix editor. This is what we'll use to edit and deploy the contract. It's a online IDE. So you can just go to remix.ethereum.org. You can also find this in the official Ethereum website. So I've already just put together everything I showed you previously in the slides. We have our Solidity version. This is essentially saying anywhere from greater than 0.0422 and less than 0.06. And we have our contract, which is a basic ERC20. And these are the things that we want to change. So I made my own personal token named Shad token. I gave it a symbol. This could be anything. So this is where, if you you can find this code online anywhere. Just search for ERC20. And this is the stuff that you want to change, right? So if you're making your personal token, you can change this to whatever your name is, right? And create that token. But one important thing to keep in mind, with the decimals, you do not want to have 18 decimals after the token. So this is something that I had to think about, where a personal token, you'd only want to have 2 decimals. So if it comes down to time, right? So if it could be broken down into 2 decimals, for example, hour and a half would be 1.50 tokens. You wouldn't want 1.500123. That wouldn't make any sense. So this is something that is very important that you want to keep in mind. And these are the events for approval and transfer, mapping the balances, setting the total supply. And as I mentioned, using the SafeMath library, which is very important to make sure your contracts are not, doesn't have integer buffer overflow attacks, or it's not vulnerable. We have the constructor, just setting the total supply, getting the total supply, getting the balance of the transfer function. Pretty self-explanatory stuff. Proof function, allowance function, transfer function with the require statements, and then the library, SafeMath library at the end. So once you have a contract that you wrote on Remix, you'll notice you also have other contracts, right? You can also do something where you can import different other contracts into your contract to be able to use them in here. So if you want to, if you're working with different Solidity files, if you're working on a project, that's pretty big, and that's complex. It's not like you're working on one Solidity file. You'll have multiple Solidity files that you're working with. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So once you have your contract written out, you'd want to go to the second tab right here with the compiler. So you'd want to choose the right compiler and make sure it is within the range of what you picked here. This seems to be fine. 0.5 is between those ranges, so this should work for us. Language is Solidity, and the EVM, keep it default, and then we'll hit compile. And so we didn't have any errors. It compiled, and we have a contract right here. And when you see this check, that's how you know that the contract is fine. There's no errors. If there was, you'd see a ton of things popping up right here. So the next thing you'd want to do is go over here to the next to the tab underneath it and check the environment. So this is what you'd want to change from the JavaScript VM. You'd want to change it to the injected Web3, and you will see this change to Ropsten network. And just to verify, if you go to your MetaMask wallet, you'll see you're on Ropsten. So it'll pick up basically what your MetaMask what your MetaMask is set to. So it would also picked up the account. So in my account, in this wallet address, I have 4.52 Ether. So that's how you know that the Web3 is talking to your MetaMask wallet. So what you want to do here is essentially, you see this deploy right here with the total. We haven't set a total number of total supply in our contract. So here we'd want to put in, how many tokens we'd want to have in the total supply, right? So as I mentioned, you want to be realistic, not like something like 2 billion, but in terms of hours, I think, like, for example, 200,000 hours is something that would make sense. So pick a number and then hit transact, and you will see a MetaMask notification pop up like this. And some things to notice is there's a gas fee. Like I said, nothing in Ethereum is free, or any blockchain. Every transaction costs money. So you want to keep in mind, what is the gas fee? Because in the real network right now, this is pretty high. And the more gas you pay the network, the faster the transaction ends up being. So, I can pick fast. So this will go by much faster because you're paying the miners more, more money. So they will mine it faster for you. So you'd want to hit confirm, but also you can check the data. This is the hex data for your contract. And it's coming from Remix Ethereum. So sometimes you want to double check, because you never know if a hacker has taken over your computer and is injected himself with some script that essentially sends the Ethereum to himself. I've heard of things like that happening. But you want to go ahead and hit confirm, and you will see the creation of ERC20. It's pending on the Ethereum now Ropsten network. So if you click on the link, it will take you to this thing called Etherscan. So one cool thing about blockchain is that everything is transparent on the blockchain. So if you go to Etherscan, this is specifically the Ropsten test network, but the regular Etherscan, if you just go to etherscan.io, it is basically Ethereum Blockchain Explorer, where you can look at all the blocks, the latest transactions, what's happening on the Ethereum blockchain, and the history in the last 14 days, the difficulty, the Ethereum price right now. So you can see the latest transactions. So so this is just a random transaction that happened. This person's wallet, they have $1.30, they have $20. So this is a crazy part, right? You don't know who this person is, but they have, you can check exactly what they have in their wallet. So, a lot of people think blockchain is anonymous and, can't get tracked, but it's, couldn't be far from the truth. It's very, very transparent, very open. it's something called pseudo anonymous, where I might not know who you are, but if I find you can find the IP address of this person, and tie the tie the identity and figure out who all these things belong to. So just a cool tool to use. So any transaction that happens on Ethereum, you can verify and check how long it's taking, what the status is. So for our contract here, we see that it was success. It took one block confirmation, went from our wallet to this contract right here. So one thing to keep in mind is there's two types of contracts on Ethereum. One's called externally owned wallets. One's internally owned. Um, this is an internally owned contract where this contract address has essentially the Solidity code that we deployed. So this is the contract that you'd want to copy right here, the address, because we would want to essentially view the tokens that we created in our MetaMask wallet. So how would we do that? So we changed the network, we deployed it. So now what we have to do is add that custom token we just created to our MetaMask to be able to see it. So the way you do that is to go into MetaMask and hit menu, and then hit this button called add token. So once you're here, go to custom token, and the token address that you just copied where you deployed the contract, you want to paste that in. Let's do that again, add token, custom token. So you'd want to paste that in there, and you will see it pops up, the token symbol and the decimals and everything right there. So hit next, and then hit add token. Well, obviously it doesn't have any value, so it's all $0. Hit add token. So there we go. As you can see in my wallet, I have 20,000 Shad tokens that I just created. And the cool part is I can send this to anybody, or I can transfer these to between my accounts. So I have a bunch of these different accounts, so I can send it to account 4. Let's do. I'm not gonna send everything. Let's send 50 Shad tokens. So this is basically 50 hours of my life sending to this other account, and there we go. And as you can see, it's pending, and this is also viewable on Etherscan. As you can see, it spent some gas, the total G weight, the gas price. You can see the activity log. So if you click on it, it will take you to Ropsten Etherscan to verify that transaction. So this is pretty cool. So we just created our own token and deployed it on the test network, and we can send it amongst each other. You can send it to your friends. Obviously, they would have to be on the Ropsten test network, but it's as easy as that. So one thing to keep in mind, obviously, once you want to deploy this on the mainnet, you'd have to switch to the main Ethereum network and have some real Ether, whether you get that from mining, or buy it from Coinbase or get it from a friend. You would have to have some Ethereum to be able to deploy it on the main Ethereum blockchain, and that obviously will cost some money. So yeah, that is how, so we just deployed our contract, we added to MetaMask. Now we can add it and sell it, give it to somebody. But the next parts of these would be to add it to a liquidity pool or an exchange like Uniswap, where you can go to Uniswap exchange. They had just updated it, but Uniswap is a decentralized exchange that allows you to swap tokens. So anybody that creates a token come in here and essentially add a liquidity pool. So this is where things get a little more advanced. So the token address that we had copied, you can paste it, but I'm not sure. So we're on the main Ethereum now. We want to switch in Ropsten. So it probably will not work with the test network, because this is obviously something that actual money is involved in these exchanges. So you'd want to be very aware of that. but the next steps would be to add, your token to a Uniswap pool, and essentially enable other people to come in and purchase your tokens and swap it for Ethereum to, Shad token or some, one of these other tokens. So that would be the next steps, and that's when things get a little more advanced that, we don't cover in this tutorial. But if you want to learn more, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter, where I kind of lay this whole thing out for you. And to give a preview of that, let's see. So just to give you a preview of that, I wrote this out on how to exactly do this, and through the help for one of my friends who actually pioneered this. His name is Joe. He kind of detailed out how to create the token that we just went through manually, but there's a much easier way to do it through OpenLaw. And if you want to create your own personal token, this is the best way to do it. So by clicking on the link in OpenLaw, you can essentially, they have templates for you to create your own personal token. So I went through this, and to create my own personal token, something that I've actually been that I deployed onto the mainnet. So this is something pretty simple where you go through, I want to tokenize myself, and then you go through these things that we kind of had to manually code, right? That you saw, but simple things like, what is your name? So, I put in my name, my initials, and this is not your actual address. This will be your ETH address. So as you're filling these in on the back end, what OpenLaw is doing is essentially, what we did, but essentially filling in these information um, on the back end. So, you, as somebody that's a beginner that doesn't really know how to code, you don't have to know how to code. You just have to know the tools to, do what you want to do. And, keep in mind, we're in the very early days. When the internet came out, 1990s, it wasn't easy to use. It took years and decades, for it to get, this easy. So, some of these tools are not perfect, but bear in mind, we are just 5-6 years into, actual smart contract platforms, compared to the internet being out, 20-25 years now. So simple things like starting token supply, right? So as I was said, something realistic like, 20,000. Then there's a supply cap. Obviously, you want to have something realistic, and then you can attach your own logo. So whether it's your company or maybe yourself, so it's pretty cool where, if you add a logo. So for example, if I go add, let's see, let me just pick something here. That's it. Documents. So if I just, let's say, pick my own, profile pic, because I'm trying to make my own, be my own advisor here and be my own consultant. This will be part of the token itself, and I can attach offers that, offer terms and conditions in here, or I can hit no, and attach consulting terms and conditions, where if you just click yes, it generates a terms of service for you and your token, which is pretty freaking cool. Where you don't have to, create your own terms and conditions, where it does it for you. Pretty amazing tool, and this is obviously something that you want to do instead of just creating your token manually and doing that. This is stuff that you want to have to protect yourself and have that contract between you and people that, purchase your token to redeem it in the future. So, after this, you'd want to hit send contract, sending, contract sent, and essentially going through the next steps. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. But pretty straightforward. Things that we did manually, now it's been automated, where you don't have to know how to exactly code, but you can launch your own personal token. And things get a little more complex, where after you do this part, you would have to create a, obviously deploying it will cost you some money. Last night when I deployed mine, it actually was asking me for about $20 to deploy it because the gas price was so high, and I had to edit it and make the gas prices lower to like $5, and it still didn't get confirmed. So it's been about 11 hours. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to just hit confirm, and make sure you know how much you're being charged is something that you want to pay for. You don't want to spend $50 just to deploy a personal contract. Um, and then obviously copying the contract address that you deploy, adding the token, the custom token that like I showed you before, doing that, and then creating a redeem contract in OpenLaw. Pretty simple. So this guide kind of takes you through it, and also how to add it onto the Uniswap exchange, where somebody can go and buy your token, exchange it for ETH, and then redeeming and burning your personal token. So once you have your token done, so how can somebody redeem it, right? That's the question. So if this is for my friend Joe, who so if you wanna, this is his template. So if you want to redeem his tokens, you go here and you type in how many tokens are you redeeming. So if you're trying to have 1 hour, so you see burn amount is 1 hours engaged is one. So you're essentially asking 1 hour of his time, and then you put in your email address and then your MetaMask wallet address that's holding the the tokens that you bought, and that's how you kind of buy an hour of his time, right? And obviously, like I said, this is very early stages. You can take this in the next level, where you can integrate this to an application for each person and make this even simpler, right? So that's essentially the next level, where this takes some time. It takes about 2 hours, an hour to 2 hours, and because of time constraints, couldn't walk you through these exact steps. But if you go, sign up, uh, check out my newsletter. It kind of details you through it, or you can just find it yourself. Do a search for how to tokenize yourself by Above Average Joe, and a couple other resources that kind of takes you through what I just took you through. And also you can follow me on Twitter to stay connected. Um, and that is all. Thank you for listening. I hope that was enlightening.